when that time comes. So super important. It's very important, if you haven't already, to set up a committee that's going to deal with the communications, and I really encourage getting different viewpoints. At Spitfire, we have a 5-person team. It's been in place since roughly the end of February. And you need to include the skills like human resources and legal, which is so important at this time, but also really making sure you're tapping the different perspectives that might represent your different audiences, including different living styles. So people who are living in roommate situations are really different than people living sort of in a single family situation. People have different responsibilities, those who have kids, those who have older parents who really rely on them. Those that are in families that are in frontline healthcare and emergency service workers. So really trying to think about, as you're making policies and practices, thinking about communicating, that you have a really good cross-section of people. And I encourage you to meet often and really focus on the check-ins. So we meet every other day right now. We can, of course, meet daily when it's required. And we really focus on intel sharing. We almost always start with, like, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? And that both means within the people we're communicating with, but also with our partners, because we obviously have a lot of people communicating with us. So we're really sharing intel about what are we hearing? What do we think is next? So it's not all decision making. A lot of it is intel sharing. And then I just remind folks, you have to be really mindful that your audiences are reacting really differently, right? We're in behavioral science here, and it may require really different types of communication. So I sort of look at different people, and I have different categories for people. Some people are real alarmists. They're very concerned. They're sharing all the charts all the time. There's a lot of data. I have helpers, the people who are constantly providing resources or offering help. I have downplayers who are a little bit like, let's wait and see. The point is that people will opt in and out of information. So if you're sending emails, if you've got Slack channels set up, I encourage you to think about that you want to have channels that are essential information only. Like, this is stuff I need everybody to read, which is different than sharing a bunch of different stuff, because what I don't want is all of that conflated in one place. So there's people who really like the minute-by-minute play, but some people just don't want that. It's not helpful to them. It increases their anxiety. To really be smart about setting up channels and norms for sharing. So, like, we've actually told staff, do not just send all staff emails anymore on this stuff. We're really keeping the all staff to critical, essential information for our company. We're doing that with other clients. I really think it's always important is just to get really clear on your purpose. For us, we're saying we want to put everyone's health and safety first. So that's how we're making our decisions. We want to be a really good partner. We're trying to share. So when Sean reaches out last night, like, of course I can get on with my peers and talk this through. And I want to be a source of relief and not anxiety. And so that talks a lot about the emotional tenor and tone that we're using in our communication. So for you, what else might that be? But always start there, that you're communicating this regularly, because we're really concerned about everyone's health and safety. Here's why I'm communicating with you. Obviously, it's really important right now to communicate clearly and in a timely fashion. And I'd follow these 3 rules when you communicate. First, to connect. And I say connect with compassion. Express that this is hard, scary, unprecedented, the words you want to use, just to make sure everybody knows, like, we're humans first, and we're letting people know that we care about them, and we know these are, turbulent times. You want to explain how you are working to stay ahead of the impacts and minimize or respond well to them. If you're in a position where you're making decisions, you're trying to see how to get ahead of this, you want to be communicating about that. And where you can, it's just really important as leaders, and if you're communicating for leaders, to spread calm and a sense of control of that which we have control over. And of course we don't, but what we do have control over is we can make sure that all of our people are as safe as possible. We can make sure that we don't have policies and practices that are making this time harder rather than easier. We can make sure that we're really approaching this in an equitable way and not putting burdens on some people and benefits to others. So I think those are the kinds of things that people can do. I would anticipate questions. I think yesterday when the president comes out and says, probably August before we're normal, that immediately all those you're communicating with are wondering, what does this mean for me? And so you want to say, like, if you've only told people what's happening till the end of March, that's a good prompt to say, get out there and say, what do you think this means for the long term? And, people are saying, scientists and all of us are using different sources, but be clear about what referential sources you're using And then anticipate. We anticipate things are actually going to get worse, right? They're going to get worse before they get better. Loved ones will get sick and possibly die. The media is being relentless, and it will continue to be so. And I think financial worries will grow. And so those are things you can anticipate. So anxiety is going to be going up, bill impacts are going up. And that's really where I would be focusing your communication on over the next 2 weeks to a month. I think that when you think about some of the most important information you're sharing, it's who people can go to for what, whose point on what. Let them know who they can go and talk to. If people are wondering if they need to go on short-term disability, who can they go to and talk about that? If somebody needs to have flexible work hours because they're taking care of family members because they're homeschooling, who can they go to for that? So really not making people guess at these times. And keep in mind, you may need to, rather than doing that huge email that's like everybody and everybody's different circumstances, shorter emails specifically to people who have kids who are now at home, short email to people who might have travel obligations and what does that mean to them, rather than gigantic emails that everybody has to sort through and figure out what's for me and what isn't. And I would really consider short communication is okay. I think some people are just paragraph after paragraph. Like if you think your people know to wash their hands, you can skip that. So I think short communications is okay. Some people who are canceling conferences, they kind of do the 3-paragraph warm up. And all people want to know is it canceled? Is it not canceled? Right? And so start with it's canceled or we're assessing and doing it. And that's an important thing too. If you don't know an answer, just communicate that you're thinking about it. Maybe share what questions you're asking. Like we're really thinking about what to do around loss of wages if people are worried about that, who you're consulting with. You know, we're talking to other people who are in a similar situation, and specifically when you will have more information. If any of your teammates or partners are starting to ask, like, are they even thinking about this? Then that sort of suggests you're behind the curve because they don't know that you're already thinking about it. And that's one of the best things you can do right now is to let people know you are thinking about things. And don't be afraid, you're not invincible, you can't think of everything. So don't be afraid to ask people what they think you should start thinking about now. I think people really appreciate leaders who are reaching out and asking them, hey, what's on your mind? And keep your promises. If you tell people, hey, on March 30th, we're going to share more, then make sure that you hit that on March 30th. They don't have to follow up with you. I always call it the airplane rule, like when you're stuck on the airplane and you're out on the runway and they say, we'll get back to you in 15 minutes. And then like 35 minutes later, they still haven't gotten back to you. And like, you can just feel all the adjective rising. So really keep your promises right now. Sometimes you're not going to be able to share information, so tell the why behind it. So if you have to say to people like, hey, if you were in the offices on this day, you may want to get tested. You know, there might have been exposure that day. They may wonder, like, why aren't you telling them more? Why, you know, and you have to say, like, because of staff confidentiality, because of patient confidentiality, we can't say, but we are telling you that there might have been exposure so you can take care of your own health needs. And that just is a reminder that generally people read silences. That's a really important thing. They read silences. They make something out of it. And usually, you know, people will come from a negative space or a place of fear, right? It's not like they're usually filling that in with rainbows, right? So really important to think about what's happening in the silences and try and fill in those gaps so that you're regularly answering questions, anticipating questions, etc. Also being really careful right now about making sweeping statements that unnecessarily stigmatize. I've had folks who were sending out communication that I was reviewing that said things like, everyone should stay at home. Well, everyone can't stay at home. So some people are frontline healthcare workers, or they care for seniors, or they care for the most vulnerable, and they do have to go to work, and we need them to go to work. Others are wage workers, and they're having to make really hard decisions right now around economics versus health, which is nothing we'd want anybody to have to make. So we want to be careful that we're not making sweeping statements, even as you're trying to suggest to your folks maybe what you think they should do or shouldn't do. But just be careful that you're not demonizing some people and the choices that they're making because of their own life circumstances and their own responsibilities in society. And just to wrap up this part of it, I would just say right now, really think about people's basic needs right now, which include connection and care. This is how you can be a good partner. I would find ways to reward problem solving. All of the impacts of what's going to happen here are impossible to track. And you may find yourself or your organization kind of moving into a command and control type of communication. but I'd consider if this is the right stance. It's better to have your entire team considering how to achieve your purpose in these times and getting all brains thinking about it. So if you set it up that everything goes through you, you could end up making some missteps and really disempowering people, which can just really exacerbate some of the anxiety that's out there right now. And then last, I would just remind everybody that as you can, share resources regularly. This includes everything from obviously what's going on in your own organization, any help things that you're using, and try and curate for people things that you think are really credible, include with health, mental health. Think about caregiving, seeing a lot of people sharing resources around caregiving at home, thinking about financial things that people might be on people's mind. You might have services through many benefits, and also in the community. I think people right now really do want to know how to help. So if you have ideas about that, I think that teams are looking for that kind of information to do what they can do while we're waiting for all of this to pass. So let me pause there, and before we go to resources, and see, Sean, if we've got any questions we want to answer, or other things or other ideas and advice people have.
Yeah, I think Kate has put a question in here. She's asking, she's our buddy Kate Shatskin from Annie Casey Foundation, says, how would you customize your advice for communicating with grantees and talking about investments in a time of uncertainty?
I'm wondering, and Kate, maybe you can follow up the question. Are you saying that the investments may, like, that grants could be shaky right now, and you're trying to forecast that? Like, you're trying to set expectation that you may have to consider that? Or are you trying to reassure them at this time that everything should be fine, you know, in the coming grant cycle?
We're waiting for that response. While we're waiting for Kate to jump back in there, let's presume that this is, oh, here she goes, talking very generally here for the good of the audience. Just wondering what your advice is, whatever we have to say.
Yeah, so that's what I would say, is just get really crystal clear. If you need to start saying to people, hey, there could be changes in grants, in financial commitments, as hard as that information is to give, I really think people would rather have the information to be able to prepare. So if suddenly things got shakier, I would find ways to say, you know, again, we're thinking about this, we're paying attention. If it's your endowment, if the stock market is impacting what are grant commitments, make sure you're explaining to them why this is getting reopened, what it means to you, and again, how you'll be approaching it and when you'll share information. If it's the opposite, if it's like, hey, we really want to take this off as a worry spot, for grantees who might be paying attention to markets or other things and wondering, or if we're even going to just reprioritize community giving around this, then you might want to say to them, I have a foundation who actually they've opened up certain funds that are going to become available. So they're communicating that they're going to be opening the funds even before they do, to start letting people know they are trying to be responsive, do responsive grant making in this time. And again, communicating that by this date we'll know more, by this date will be open for consideration. And also they've been seeking ideas. They're trying to co-create how to create a responsive fund with grantees. So they're letting them know how they can actually suggest ideas and ways to consider highest best use of grant dollars that might become available. So those are all things to consider.
Okay. Karen comes in on the other side of this, and she says, on the other side, how to speak to funders about reconfiguring existing grants to be more technology focused in order to account for the need to telecommunicate. So I'm just going to jump in here and say, Karen, one of the things I've noticed, you may have seen this, Kristen, I think it's the Robert Stern Foundation in New York has done a really interesting thing. So if you're a grant maker, this might be worth looking at. It's on their website. They have recently converted all of their grants to general operating support, and they have extended all of their existing grants for a year. So if something was sunsetting in 2020 or 2021, it's been punched up a year. So they +1 to everything. That's, I think, a great way, if you have the means and ability to do so, notwithstanding the economic environment that we find ourselves in or we'll be finding our way through. That is a way that one foundation is managing that. It's converting everything to Gen Ops. I'm sure that's complicated. I don't begin to pretend I know anything about how that works. But converting all grants to Gen Ops and extending out a year just to give some clarity and to ensure that frontline organizations, nonprofit organizations that are going to be so vital and are so important right now have the means of knowing we're going to be able to make payroll or rely on that particular funding stream to help them do whatever it's doing.
Yeah, I think the other thing is to try and figure out that this is a time for experimentation around technology. we had a funder site visit that had to cancel for a partner of ours. And suddenly there's a lot of concern, right? Oh my gosh, we're not going to be able to show them these things. They're worried that now the funder won't understand all the great stuff that they're doing. And so the funder is actually creating some anxiety, right, by not figuring out an alternative, which is, okay, we're not going to be able to site visit probably for a few months right now, rather than just putting everything on the back burner, unless you're able to do what Sean says, which is just say, hey, general operating, whatever you do is great. Then I think you have to start thinking about, well, what does a virtual site visit look like? What does a virtual check-in look like? And actually work with grantees to try and create some of these new technology-based ways to do grant making, to do evaluation, and to do the check-ins. Because I think, and it goes a little bit, it sounds like the Will's question, which is for those of us that are working on things that aren't related to this, you know, I think everybody doesn't know, are we supposed to just be quiet for a couple of months? You know, when is it okay to be communicating about things that are unrelated to this, but are long-term important issues to be working on? So if you want to set expectations with your grantees, which is like, you guys can be quiet and we won't read anything to that. We're going to assume you're super highly effective and we'll check back in with you later in the summer. That's great. Otherwise, start to talk to them about how you're going to be in communication with them, so that they know how to do that. And Will, for you, I think, you know, people are working, and I think people want a sense of normalcy. So I would encourage you. We actually had a funny stream yesterday on progressive communicators where a bunch of journalists who are not covering coronavirus actually said all the stories they were looking for ideas on. And I think there was just a sense of relief of like, oh, right, because there's still other stuff happening. So I would still be thinking about audiences you can be in communication with. Many people are working, and I wouldn't assume that you just have to be silent. But again, I would always ask people, like, is now a good time? Do you have the bandwidth and the mental headspace to deal with it? And sometimes, honestly, I get on the top of a phone call and I ask somebody and they're like, you know what, I just, right now in this hour, I don't. And that's okay. Sometimes we try it the next day, maybe we'll try it in a month. So I would just let people opt into communication and give them that chance.
Yeah, just to maybe layer on top of that, I was talking to some folks over at NIH yesterday, and they are concerned about the information environment that we're in. I'll just read a little bit of what I shared out with a couple folks yesterday. It's a crowded information space. On a normal day, it's loud and dysfunctional, right? And this is an exceptional day or week that we find ourselves in. There's conflicting guidance, there's misinformation, and right now, frankly, it's a mess. One of the things that they were asking for at NIH yesterday, this is a place where maybe just take a note here, this is a way y'all can be helpful, is they were asking for a signal boost. And what that meant was they felt that foundations and nonprofits had a unique stature or standing in American society right now. Whether that's a community foundation or your local nonprofit, chances are you're really well thought of locally in your community and then broadly nationally. I think there's a lot of support and understanding and believe foundations and nonprofits are a constructive force in society. And so one way is that you can actually help, in addition to whatever communication you may be doing internally and externally, is in boosting some of the messages coming from NIH and CDC specifically. I think we need to narrow the funnel and make sure, and this will probably speak to the resources Kristen's talking to, but make sure that you are pointing people towards the people who can help keep people safe. Because while some of us who are living in maybe certain parts of the country are already seeing activities shift dramatically, others are not. I know I was talking to Kristen, who lives down in Orlando now, just yesterday, and if you were out in Orlando this weekend, things looked awfully normal relative to what things might be looking like in a Boston or a San Francisco or a New York. So I think we want to remember that our first order of purpose here is we are in an emergency situation. I don't mean to be alarmist, it's just a fact. And so anything that you all can do to amplify the messages of CDC and NIH right now, really helpful. Let me just give you a couple things that they suggest. I'm just going to read off my phone, forgive me. But they said, if you're familiar with the practice of sharing your status on Facebook, maybe we've done that, maybe you've done that. Well, that's the general idea, to get lots of organizations sharing the signal from credible medical and health experts, the CDC. That could look like, these are their words, resharing or retweets of CDC and NIH COVID-19 messages, right? Posting links to NIH and CDC COVID-19 resources prominently on the website of your organization. Even if you're in the business of, I don't know, helping cats and dogs, you run a humane society, ensuring that there's lots of vectors where people are finding this information, really helpful right now as a crisis practice. Sending an email directing your audience to CDC and NIH. So if you have an email list of 5,000 people, it's not unreasonable to believe a lot of those folks are hearing from you, and maybe it's not appropriate for you to reach out. But if you think that you're going to reach a couple of people who may not have gotten the message yet for whatever reason, that might be a useful thing to do. that was sort of the big things, was just start helping to be a signal boost for some of these frontline public health institutions. If you can do that, that's great. All right, I'm going to shut up. Kristen, you want to talk about some recommended resources, and then
Yeah, I was going to say I have a few more to say, and I had told Sean and his team I unfortunately do have at 2:30. So yeah, but I do want to just follow up on what Emily was saying and a little bit what Rebecca was saying, which is, do keep in mind too, this is a great time to get some of your communication house in order. If you're not a person that's communicating a lot right now, it might be a great time to go figure out where your brilliant stories are, how you can tell them more visually, to actually be ready to go when the window opens back up. So almost all of us never have this level of downtime, so try and take it as a gift if you can. And think about ways that you might actually be innovating how you're communicating. As far as resources go, gallup.com, if you go to their workplace subsection, and I'll send some of these links over to Tristan and team to send as a follow-up, they're really talking about what leaders are doing to communicate well. So it's a good place to go. If you saw in philanthropy.com, they actually had a responding to the coronavirus, and they did a compendium of tons of resources. So encourage you to check that out. And again, I will send the link. And then for those of you that are just learning how to basically communicate, keep staff engaged, keep your teams engaged, there's a distributed.blog. It's written by Matt Mullenweg, so he's the founder of WordPress, and his team's always been distributed. So he doesn't think about it as working remotely. He has a distributed team all the time. So he has both a blog and a podcast that just basically talks about how to do that well. And I think that that's a good place to be looking as you're thinking about keeping engagement and morale as high as possible. As far as looking ahead, I do want to say, I think we're going into super troubled waters. I think that your teams are going to start experiencing outages. People are going to feel really stretched and scared, whether they get sick, family members get sick. They're going to need reassurance. I think we're headed into that time. I think we're going to see people getting sick, and we're going to start to see and hear about deaths that are getting closer to us and directly impacting those we care about, ourselves, and those we work with. So I think you just have to sort of get ready for that as a serious possibility. And what does that look like? I think the media is going to be relentless. I think that, obviously there's a ton of responsible media, and then there's kind of media that's really making us very nervous about how everything is going. So just keep in mind that this is how everybody's life is going to be for the next few weeks, and that's their experience. So again, if you can be that calm, compassionate partner, I just think that is going to be most useful and most needed during this time. So thinking about that. And also sometimes you may have to tap out, like being that person all the time when you also would like to go freak out sometimes. So just think about, are there times you need to tag team with someone else to be able to offer that thinking? And I also liked how Rebecca said, don't forget that right now, humor, just sort of having a shared experience can be really sweet right now. I share poems with my staff, moving into what Spitfire is doing. And I think it really helps sometimes to just think about something else, or we have very funny pop culture quizzes. So things that do bring a little levity, because we know things are gonna get pretty heavy here. I also think I would quit trying to communicate in 2 weeks. I know everybody's like, we'll do this till the end of March, and then we'll reassess, and then we'll reassess, and then we'll reassess. I think it's more like, hey, let's kind of think of this as how we're going to operate till the end of April, and then we will be reassessing. So rather than everybody feeling like I can only plan week by week by week, I would try and get people to be able to plan more in like months. I just think it makes it easier for people to start to think about what routines might look like. As far as what Spitfire is doing, I've mentioned some of it. We have a committee in place. We're super proactive. We started on March 2nd, telling people that they could work wherever is best for you. We anticipated school and daycares closing, and we set expectations that we would offer flex hours to our parents and our caregivers, and also the idea that realizing they're all getting a job, like a job they didn't necessarily have before on top of their full-time job, and like, what does that look like? So we tell them to work with their managers about making that reasonable for them. It's not just a switching which hours you're working, but also how many hours can you actually work in a day, and seeing caregiving as the real work that it is. We got everybody to work remotely. We sent people home on March 11th and closed all of Spitfire offices. Our committee meets every other day. We communicate daily. At office, we have daily hangs. These are both gabs, just straight up pop culture, what's going on. They are not work related. They're virtual water cooler ones. We also, several times a week, we do mindfulness. So we do guided mindfulness as a team to learn that practice right now. We do trainings. Once a week we hold a training. This week we did how to work remotely, especially for people who aren't used to doing that. Next week we have managing remote teams. So for people who are generally used to working with people in office, so we try and anticipate the pain points of what people are doing. We have a Slack channel dedicated to this. So again, we're trying to say, if you have tips about that, put them on this channel, don't send them to all staff. We're also encouraging spontaneity. So we're missing the pop into people's office thing. So we tell people to call people out of the blue, which is, by the way, not something people are used to doing anymore. So that's been a funny experiment. But we are encouraging spontaneity to keep connected with everybody. And then our leadership team, we do communicate to all staff at least every other day. And so again, they know what we're thinking about, what we're hearing. We're a pretty transparent place. And I think it just makes everybody feel like we're really watching this as a top priority for us. And we hear back from our staff if there's things they want us to be thinking about, and we play that back out to the whole firm so everybody knows that we're responsive and paying attention. So with that, Sean, I'm gonna turn it back over to you. It sounds like we've got some great questions going on, and I know there's lots of good advice in this crew too. So I just encourage everybody to be sharing right now. It just seems like we're all in uncharted territory, so we'll get through it together. Thanks for having me today, Sean.
Chris, I'm going to put you on the spot before you leave. We're going to probably be doing this once or twice a week. Can we count on you to join us again over time?
Of course, and I would love to get to be a participant as well. Again, I know there's tons of wisdom in this crowd, so I am looking forward to learning together.
Awesome. All right, everybody, stick around. Kristen's jumping off, but we are not. While we pick up the second back half hour, I think the way Tristan and I were envisioning this is, frankly, gang, we're figuring this out as we go. So this is a space for us all to ask some questions of one another, share some resources. Go ahead and start putting your questions into the chat. I'll read them out loud so you don't have to necessarily follow along, although you're welcome to do so. Also, if you've got examples of messages that you all have put out recently, whether that's about remote work, whether that's about a change to grant funding, about how you're serving folks if you're in the NGO space, go ahead. If you have a link to something, throw it in the chat. We also, as you probably know, I hope you know, we've created an open source or a collaborative Google Doc and a Google Sheet sharing examples. Sort of principle we've been operating on is we're all moving really fast and we're going to break stuff, and that's okay. But if there's ways that we can all help each other be a little bit more effective and efficient, if you put stuff in there, please know the plagiarism is going to be the rule of the game. People are going to grab your stuff, they're going to copy it, they're going to paste it, they're going to change a few words, but they may just take your work, and you may save somebody half an hour or 45 minutes by doing that. So if you don't mind doing that, I think that's great. Why don't I go ahead just to tee us up? I'm going to read you all something that I saw in the Washington Post this weekend, just in terms of level setting, that I think is the spirit that hopefully this group and others are going to carry forward in the weeks to come. This is in the Washington Post. This is from a local Washington area rabbi. Many of you have already seen this perhaps. But he said, to mitigate, this is talking about the coronavirus, to mitigate, we must collaborate. To collaborate, we must separate. Every hand that we don't shake must become a phone call that we place. Every embrace that we avoid must become a verbal expression of warmth and concern. Every inch and every foot that we physically place between ourselves and another must become a thought as to how we might help. How's that sound for folks? Does that sound familiar? Like, I think hopefully you're feeling as hopeful in spite of everything and what's to come, that there are opportunities here for us all to learn and do a little bit of growing. Catherine, I will, when I can, I will share that. Tristan, if you don't mind, I will, if I knew how to use the chat thingy, I get it off my, maybe I can just hold it up to the screen. Is that helpful? I don't know if y'all can read that. Tristan, can you read that? Not really? Okay.
No, not really.
You know what? I promise I will post this in the Google Doc so that people can find it, but I think it's probably a little bit helpful. Carrie says we'll send it out after. I think the other thing, there's a line from Dr. King that we've been talking about. Let me see if I can dig it up for y'all real quickly. Something we were thinking about in terms of ComNet, which is going to still, certainly we hope, happen in Atlanta this fall. Where was this? It was under aphorisms, is that right? Martin Luther King, another little just quote to get you through the day. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly. I think we're certainly seeing that borne out in this moment.
Sean, hi, it's Susan Feeney with
Hey,
GMMB Ground Zero Seattle. How are you?
very
Thank
well.
you for doing this. And Kristen, I know she's hopped off, but she was amazing. So
Always is.
very thankful really for all of you. A couple of things I thought that I might add that we are learning from our foundation clients, others might benefit from. And also we're pretty deeply involved in the most affected counties in California, state, California, and the state here in Washington state. So please share the resources of your state, your governor, your mayors with your all of your channels. Thank you for talking about all the CDC and all of that work too, but also very important to share your local officials. The other thing that I was going to say, many of you may know this, but a number of funding groups have formed, right? The education funders group, the environmental funders group, around ways to collaborate and pull resources for nonprofits and people who need it most at this time. So if you belong to any of those collaboratives, it's a really super good time to check in and help people rethink about how they can be helpful, right? That's what everybody wants to do right now, to be helpful. I will, when I hop off here, I will post a ton of resources, the things that we've posted with Santa Clara County, with the governor in California and some other places. So not to say you have to share all of them depending where you are, but they're really pretty good examples of language and tone. And I think as we're finding, Kristen was super clear about being firm and about being clear, but not inciting panic. So those are the three overall things. I will throw our resources on there as we go, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you very much, Susan. Susan's being modest. I was actually just on with one of her colleagues who's doing that work in the state of California. Y'all should be aware, one of the things that the folks at GMMB have been doing is actually going through and monitoring some of the messages that even the local departments of health, mayor's offices are developing and cleaning it up so that we are all writing. This probably goes without saying. You may have seen a message we sent out. The order of the day right now is brevity. And I'll be honest with y'all, we're not all that good at that in our sector, but brevity is key. Facts, right? Clarity, right? If your writing is not brief, clear, and fact-based, it's problematic. And that is a challenge, I think, for all of us in this moment. You should probably be aiming to try to write at about a first grade, second grade reading level. If it's got multiple syllables, strip it out. If it's a compound sentence, strip it out. There's a way to write differently. You need to be really clear and write in an active voice. Put the most important things at the top. I'm not going to name names, but I got an email yesterday for a conference I was planning to attend, and I had to read it twice, as did a colleague, to figure out it was canceled. Which is probably also a good lesson for us in information design, something to be thinking about. Information design is really essential in moments like this because people are sifting through a lot of information quickly. So for a lot of folks, the email header, literally what it's going to say in their email, you know, if you're looking at them, as I guess many of us are now getting used to, seeing these things. The headline's everything. Decide, you make a decision right there. I'm going to read it. I'm going to wait for later, or I'm going to just delete it. It's not worth my time. So be really mindful of how you're designing things. One of the great practices, I was hoping we do a webinar on this. I think maybe we'll have to do it sooner rather than later, is in the military. It's a very easy practice because they're mindful when they're communicating. There's lives at stake. They do this practice called the bluff. Many of you are probably familiar with this. This is the bottom line up front. They usually put 2 or 3 bullets right at the top of the email before they even have it hello or anything else to give you the key pieces of information that you need to know. The action-oriented items or key essential pieces of information. They're 5 words or less, 3 bullets. And that way, if someone's working really fast, they can read it, move on. If not, if they see something that's particularly useful and interesting to them, they can jump down and get more detail. But I think this is actually probably a good opportunity for all of us to get really good at some of our email or communications hygiene. Krista shares, and hopefully y'all are looking in the chat here, by the way, everybody's tossing in some resources, which are just tremendous. Maybe this is the place where we can pause a little bit. If there's some questions or places where y'all have need. My guess is you hopped on because you have a need, you want to know something, and maybe we can do a little bit of matchmaking here. Someone knows something and someone else is maybe a little bit further along. And can answer that question for each other, because I think that's when networks are so powerful, is that we have a diversity, a lot of experience and expertise among the 90 of us or whatever it is that are in the room right now. Let's help each other out. Questions you might have, go ahead and type those in. Oh, come on, don't be shy. There we go. Question for the group. I know everyone is super uncertain about everything right now, but how far out are people pushing upcoming external deadlines, like RFP deadlines, applications for upcoming opportunities? Are folks just pausing for now? I'll answer that for the network, and I'd be curious if other folks want to throw in how you're thinking about that. We've hit pause this week. So we have, Kristen has been working on the Clarence B. Jones Award, the Impact Award that we give out, which we're super excited about. And normally, our calendar, editorial calendar says this is the week we start really making a big push for that information to get out to everyone, to all of you and to others. And we're just not doing that this week. Doesn't feel appropriate. Again, in the spirit of lowering the level of noise, trying to think about this sort of in terms of, when we're all driving and there's like an ambulance behind us and you pull over to the side and you get out of the way. I think that's a little bit of how we all ought to be thinking, particularly about external communications, is if it's not urgent, get out of the way. I think tomorrow, y'all hopefully are aware of this, we're going to have Dr. Robert Wenzel. Do I have that right, Tris? Is it Richard?
Richard.
I got that entirely wrong. Dr. Richard Wenzel, who's actually old buddies with Anthony Fauci at NIH. He's 80 years old. He's one of the leading epidemiologists and infectious disease docs in the country. And he's going to join us tomorrow for an hour or so. He'll go longer if we need him to try to explain kind of from a docs and science perspective what we're all facing, so we have a good sense of what's ahead. Tristan, you and I have had a chance to be on the phone with him a little bit. You want to kind of just characterize what you think we're going to hear a little bit tomorrow? Are you concerned based on your conversations there?
Am I concerned?
About kind of the wave that's headed our way.
Oh, yeah. So Dr. Wenzel is really interesting because not only is he a trained pathologist and epidemiologist, but he's also an author. So he has sort of an interesting, I guess, perspective to offer on, one, the virus itself and kind of case studies throughout humanity that we might learn from, but two, also some interesting ways we can talk about this, hopefully. So I think, like Kristen alluded to earlier, it's only going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And there's some probably dark times ahead, but I think there are things everybody can do to prepare without panicking. It sounds, I guess, it's hard to do that in practice, but that should be the goal.
Yeah, calm and perspective. You heard that. So the rules that we sent out earlier this week were brevity, facts, clarity, calm, and perspective. Those are the 5 rules of crisis comms right now. Brevity, facts, clarity, calm, and perspective. Really, really important that we all practice that, even if sometimes maybe we're not feeling it so much. And maybe it's also okay to explain, hey, you're a little bit scared. I know I am. I think I'm thinking a lot about some of our elders in the community and even just our neighbors nearby and some of the challenges that they're facing. Karen's asking, I need to know how to use Zoom and other technology to do our work. Small organizations need inexpensive offer. So Tristan, you're actually really good at this because you moved to remote work and you were the person who engineered Slack. I just can't speak today, gang. Slack for our office. Do you want to just kind of explain how to do that and what the costs were, both in terms of actual money and then in terms of just kind of learning curves for folks?
Yeah, I don't remember how much Zoom was off the top of my head. I think it's definitely less than $1,000, or if not, it's right around there. We're a team of 5.
Do they have a nonprofit price? Is there a nonprofit discount?
No, they have, I think, 4 tiers. So there's basic, which is free, but you're pretty limited in what you can do. I think meetings are capped at 45 minutes and a low number of attendees. The step up from that is pro, which is up to 100 participants on a meeting for an unlimited amount of time. Then there's business, which is up to, I think, 1,000. Oh, no, it's up to 300 participants for an unlimited amount of time. And then at the pro level, you start getting some features like being able to record, stuff like that. It's super simple. Once you do it a couple of times, it's fairly intuitive. So right now, this is just a regular Zoom call, but there's other functionality. So if you've ever been on a network webinar, that's a little bit different too. So it's, you can have, I think, up to 100 panelists. And then depending on the webinar plan you get, you can have 500 attendees, 1,000 attendees, more as needed. And I'm sharing my screen right now so you can see this slide that I drew up earlier today that has our agenda. You can share screens, whatever. Super easy to use. I highly recommend it for virtual meetings. I think a lot of people are moving towards Zoom right now because I had a question for them about our account that I sent them yesterday through multiple channels, and I haven't heard back from them as of, I guess, 2 o'clock this afternoon. So I think a lot of people are probably jumping on the Zoom train. Another internal communications tool that's really helpful. I'm not sure, my sense, but I could be in this DC bubble, is that a lot of people are using Slack now. Maybe it's not as widespread as I think it is, but there's also a lot of functionality there. It takes some getting used to, but it's really good at just doing the basics. So we found that email traffic between our office was getting a little unwieldy. So Slack is a really good way to organize information you want to get out in discrete channels. So we have a channel set up for webinars, one for our other projects, one for resources we want to share with the field right now. And that's a really good way to not only share out information remotely, but organize it as well, which I think is a challenge people might be encountering now.
Yeah, also probably worth just on top of that, thank you, that's all excellent advice. Slack, after, you know, a modest learning curve of like within a half an hour, you're going to figure it out, or certainly within a day, is making sure that everybody's clear on how you're going to communicate. If it's going to change, you need to set up some rules. So for us, when we moved to Slack, we made an agreement amongst our team. We weren't going to email each other random kind of yes, no questions. We'd use Slack, which functions almost like an instant message, to do that. We'd also generally not use messaging, whether that was like a WhatsApp or for iPhones, the texting thing. We tried to be really clear about what we were going to use so people could have a reasonable expectation of where to look to go get messages. And Slack is really excellent because it actually sends you alerts. It sends you an email when you get a message. So if that's something you're looking for and your team is used to living in maybe a Microsoft Office suite, I know Microsoft also has some new tools that are kind of like Slack and kind of like Zoom. I know some folks are using those. We live in Google. The other nice thing about Slack is if you are a Google shop, it links up with Google really, really nicely so that you can collaborate and share documents. But the three tools I think you probably need are a cloud-based collaborative editing tool. That could be something in Microsoft. I know Google is built for that. Slack for communicating with one another and setting up ground rules about how you're going to use it. And then finally for us, it's been Zoom, but obviously there's Google Hangouts, there's FaceTime, there's other technologies that exist. We like Zoom because it's the most stable we found. We've played with a bunch and we found not all of it, including Skype, to always be so reliable. Other questions, and we will bring in some folks to talk about remote work in the days to come. Today, we really wanted to focus on kind of the moment we're in, which is that, you know, as Susanna, there's an ambulance coming. Let's all just pull over to the side, figure out how we can be most helpful. That may be first pulling over, and secondly, ensuring other folks know there's an ambulance coming, making sure that they other questions. So far, most distant event that's been canceled on our calendar was mid-May. Yeah, just so y'all know, the network has a board meeting scheduled for New Orleans in late May. If I had to guess, I think we're going to be able to do that, but I really don't know. And I think we've already had conversations, I can't talk, gang. Conversations at the board level about potentially what's that look like if we have to do it virtually. And if we did, we'd use this, we'd use Slack. Catherine asks, how do you balance information gathering from grantees as to their needs versus not causing them any stress? If you're checking in with them, they may wonder what you're doing with what you are doing with funding. Perhaps we don't have the answers, suggestions. And Vanessa, I guess as an answer to Catherine, I believe says, we're just pressing pause on everything for a couple of weeks, like our in-process annual report. Yeah, I think, gang, I mean, obviously I'm not your boss, but I would think most bosses, most boards are in the same boat that we all are. This has been a great equalizer and a good reminder that the most important thing that we all have is our health. Everything else is built off the fact that we all are healthy and that we have reasonable expectation that tomorrow's coming our way. So I think most of us are trying to be as generous and kind. Y'all certainly are by hopping on here and trying to help one another. Hey, Tristan, would you mind, while I'm yakking, pulling up the shared Google Docs? I'm guessing everybody's seen that, but maybe if they're not, just making sure they're aware of it and how to use it. We can do a little bit of a how-to guide while we're here.
Sure, give me 1 second.
And it says, oh, I just heard, this is awesome. Whoa, damn, Tristan, we should learn this. Zoom has a nonprofit discount through TechSoup. So, and Zoom Pro is $15 per month, which is not so bad. And I can probably cancel at any time. Worst case scenario, you're out maybe like $1,000 for the year. Dale says using MS Teams for internal and Ring Central for external. With Ring Central, we pay about $70 per month. Oh, that's the other thing. Yeah, conference calls. Believe it or not, those still work, right? Talking to folks on the phone. We did one earlier today. Uber conference, we use the network. I don't think we pay anything for it. If we do, it's nominal. It's like $50 a year. Will's warning everybody, Microsoft's cloud collaborating, it's fine for PCs, but it doesn't play nicely with Macs. Yeah, we're a Mac office, so we live with the Google tools. And Vanessa has, we've also pressed pause on our strategic plan implementation process that we were working on, but we'll likely take that up again in a month or two, who knows. And Krista from Kresge says, that's what we do too. Ring Central, video, collaborating, pretty much the same as Zoom. Thank you, Will. That's awesome. Sharing out a Google Drive with a bunch of things. So Tristan, do you want to explain what we're looking at here on the screen? Carrie and Yabby and the team pulled this together, and obviously we started it, but the really cool thing is lots of people have been using it. I think, as you can see, there's about, whatever that is, about 100 folks, 98 folks who are in there right now making use of this. You want to explain what this is?
Yeah, so it's an open source, and what that means in layman's terms is anybody can add to it or edit it. Google Doc that I guess you can see there are about 100 people in there right now, where we're collecting examples of what we think is excellent crisis communications, resources people can use, ways to message things, and we've sort of broken it out here. You can go through this. I just shared the link in the chat. Also some sort of rules of the road about how to communicate right now that I think you alluded to earlier, Sean. But this is free for anybody, network member or not, to go into, use. It's going to be better the more people add to it and share what they're doing or things they've seen. So, you know, please feel free to access it.
You want to share on the Google Sheets as well? Do you mind terribly?
Yeah, 1 second.
And so the way we're sort of thinking about this, gang, is the doc is a place to go to kind of get the basics. What do you need to know is like the rules. Maybe it's the kind of thing you pass to a colleague or a boss. Here are the rules to communicate right now. And then more sort of technical is this Google Sheet, which Tristan's calling up in a quick minute. And you'll see this. It's linked from the Google Doc that we have there. It's also, all this is available on comnetwork.org. And so this Google Sheet, Tristan, you want to explain what this is? And again, about 60-some people in there right now.
Yeah, so, and I don't want to take credit for this. My colleagues, Carrie and Yabby, actually made it. I'm just the messenger here. But what they've done here is hyperlinked to, sorry, excuse me, examples from the field in this tab on the left. And then these are bucketed out by different types of communication. So you can see these are all grantee communications, but if you can choose from this drop-down menu, there's all sorts of stuff. So there's community support, how to do telework, new policies you may be enacting, email, stuff that's specific to foundations and nonprofits, examples of leadership. So all sorts of things. So they hyperlink to whatever the actual page or press release or whatever is, tell you what kind of, or what type of communication it is, and then where it came from. And then the second tab over here are just more resources. So stuff from the CDC, the NIH, you can see HubSpot, Harvard Business Review, just anything that we found or that others have found that we think could be useful or helpful.
Yeah, and this is a lot to go through. I will say for the examples of the field, if you want to avail yourself of one of these, I think the general rule we have right now is these are not normal times, obviously. So if you need to copy and paste some language out of there, you know, do so. I don't think there's any plagiarism at play here. I don't think there's any pride. If you need to move swiftly, and a lot of us are attending to things we just didn't have to do last week, this is the aim here, is to be as helpful and efficient as we possibly can be. So I know we're getting up to the top of the hour. I guess we've got 7 minutes left. Is anybody on this call, either unmute yourself or use the chat, it's even better, with a burning question, place that they need some help, because you got 70-some friends who are willing to help you out right now. And we're not going away. That's why this Google Doc exists. And we'll be back in the next couple of days. We'll be back with Dr. Wenzel tomorrow, and we'll be back and do this again if y'all think this is useful. But if you can help us, either put a question in, okay? If you have a question, go ahead and throw that in. Or what do you need? So not a question, but like things that you need, because we can presumably collectively give you some of that. We can help. What's the best way to stay in the loop and get invites for future calls like this, Emily? Today we did it as sort of an experiment, so we narrowed the field. We just sent this to network members, but I think we realized that there's folks across the world who are using this and need this. So the next time we do this, we're going to gather virtually using webinar tech, which allows us to have a bigger audience. So we'll invite as many people as can come, and we'll try to get the word out as far and wide as we can using social and email and the network's website. Did you mention Jessica? Yes. Hey, Jessica, if it's useful to you all, we're just going to keep doing this. I wish I could tell you we know exactly what it's going to look like. But I think the aim is let's all just kind of give ourselves an hour. We'll get on. We'll raise some questions. unfortunately, given the nature of things, I think things are going to be changing day by day. And so it'll probably feel a little different the next time we get on, and there may be some other things we need to be learning. But we've gotten, like Kristen, some of our colleagues that we respect and admire. Matt James from GMMB has agreed to be with us. He's been advising the state of California on their response. So I think he'll be super helpful and have some good ideas. Doug Hadaway, our good friend, worked on marriage equality, is going to join us as well. Berkeley Dar, who's a network collaborator who frequently is just one of the best facilitators I've ever met. She's going to teach us all how to become better facilitators, because I think we're all going to be doing a lot of that in the next couple of weeks, helping folks lead meetings and such virtually. Who else do we have that's committed to us? Joanne Krell, former network board chair, is going to be with us as well. And so we're going to avail ourselves. And if you'd like to help, if you have something special that you know that you think could be useful to folks, send me or Tristan an email or well, yeah, I guess an email, or shoot us an email or message or whatever through social media. Happy to have the help. I think this is one of those cases where we're just all going to learn from and lean on one another in the next couple of weeks. What else we got in here, gang? Not a question, but just wanted to share. We are planning to do similar virtual roundtables for community foundation staff and leadership, not specific to communications, but that can certainly be a topic. So for any community foundations on the line, please feel free to reach out to to M. McLean. Hopefully you can see this in the chat, everybody. That's MMACLEAN at cfleads.org. Yeah, I can't tell you how important I think community foundations, especially, we're all going to have a role to play here, gang, but I think community foundations are going to have a specifically important role because this is going to be rolling out in communities around the country in different ways. Other questions, just running down to the bottom. Can we copy this chat once? Can we get a copy of this chat once this is over? Yes, Karen. Carrie Klein has taken some notes and Tristan recorded this. We might have missed just the top, but we will share this out. We will put it in the Google Doc. And we shared our emails. Yeah, you have a question? Look, we're always going to lean on each other. We're going to try to help as much as we possibly can. And click the drop dots on the rest to save the chat. Oh, there you go. And Yabby just shared the notes from today's discussion. So help yourselves, and we'll put that in the Google Doc as well. About 2 or 3 minutes left. Any burning questions? Last chance. Going before we all hop off. Let me tell you, Kristen was talking about half an hour ago about how it's also helpful to sort of think about people's mental health. I was chatting with a colleague. They've got a Slack channel set up, and one of the channels is specifically, I think it's called like the shoe game. And everybody just takes a picture since they're all working from home, and they're just taking snapshots of their feet and showing off their crazy kicks. So I think that's probably something that if you're thinking about building a Slack channel or something, yes, it's really important to make sure you have good, clean lines of communication, but also make some room for our shared humanity. And I think especially in the weeks to come, it's going to be hard. I think we're going to hear about that from Dr. Wenzel tomorrow. I think people need to prepare for what's headed our way, even if for most of us it's not quite here yet. Other questions, folks, that you may have? Hey, Tristan, will you navigate over to comnetwork.org so people can find, if they don't have this URL, they can find it through the front door. Just want to show them how to get there.
Yeah, give me 1 second.
And maybe a question for everybody, just type this in. Do you want us to do this again? Y'all are being kind of quiet. Do you want us to do this again? If the answer is yes, just type in yes. Okay, Susanna says yes. Mandy, Emily. All right, then we're going to do it. This isn't that hard. I wish I was like Mo Willems. Do you all know about this, by the way, while Tristan's pulling this up? Mo Willems, the guy who writes the children's books, like Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus. He is, if you're a parent, this is a hot tip. 1 o'clock every day, and then it gets posted on YouTube. He is hosting a live video session for like 30 minutes. My 6-year-old got our class today with Mo Willems, which is pretty awesome. So we're all kind of, well, maybe this is a better version of Mo Willems. Go to Kennedy Center's website. They've got a link to that. All right, Tristan, you want to explain to people what they're seeing here on the website?
Yeah, so if you go to comnetwork.org, that's our homepage, and we're going to try to surface all the resources we've been talking about as much as possible. So you can see we've featured these 2 topics now, and if you scroll down a little bit beyond that, so events here, we've got our webinar tomorrow. Sorry?
Click on that so people know how to RSVP, just in case.
Okay, I'll open that up in a new tab.
Tristan, your tab game is small today, buddy. Normally, Tristan is the man of 1,000 tabs.
Well, this is my public browser.
And just rest assured, he's cleaned up for you. Most often, Tristan is not happy unless he's got 40 tabs open. I see a few of you millennials smiling. You know that game.
And then if you scroll down beyond events and beyond our event banner here, there's insights and resources. So if you click on that, oops, that's how you get to the Google Doc that I shared earlier. So if you want to register for the webinar tomorrow, you can go here and then you click this RSVP button. And that'll take you to Zoom with the webinar registration. And actually, we'll probably move to the webinar model for future meetings like this because it's easier for people to register and get a reminder. And just logistically, I think a little bit easier to share out some of the information too. So this is probably what you're going to be looking at for future gatherings over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and this is open to everybody tomorrow, gang. I think we had over 600 people RSVP. I believe we have a limit of 500 live participants. So if for some reason, just so y'all know, if you can help us get the word out, if you get locked out, don't freak out. We're going to record it. We'll turn it around and post it up online as quickly as we can. Like give us, hour, 2 hours, whatever it is. We'll also probably turn it into a transcript. We don't normally do that for webinars, but in this case, maybe we will, if that's useful to folks, so that for folks who want to copy and paste some of the information from Dr. Wenzel, they can do that. Okay, so that's the webinar. Tristan, you want to go back and just show them how to get into the Google Doc from the front door?
Yep, so again, comnetwork.org, scroll down, you'll get to insights and resources. You click on the comms triage kit. And then quick links to some of the stuff that we talked about today. So here's the Google Doc. Here's the Google Sheet. I just opened those new tabs. So easy access. Sorry, this is taking a minute to load. Oh, looks like we have heavy traffic, and that's why. Well, you guys have already seen that, but I can also just share this URL out with everybody in the chat right now as well. So you can bookmark it if you want, or do whatever to keep it handy.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and give everybody back their time. Last thing, maybe just to note, was in this document, we're all gathering around Social. Yabby's doing an amazing job for us there on the hashtag comms for good. That's COMMS 4, number 4, GOOD, comms for good. Use that, plug into it. You'll be able to share stuff that you've got. We'll be keeping an eye on it. If you're sharing stuff, we'll try to add it to that Google Sheet as we can. And other folks can just use that as a place to monitor, keep an eye on what other folks are doing. Thank you, everybody. Karen's final question is, will all current participants automatically get current invites? Karen, if you're a network member, and I guess you are because you got this invitation, you will get an invitation for the next one. If not, if you have any concern about that, if you go back to comnetwork.org and just click join our email list, you will automatically be enrolled. And we're just going to start sending this out far and wide. We want to be as helpful as we possibly can. Our mission is to help everybody get connected, gather, and stay informed. Who does this kind of work, does comms for good. With that, why don't we let you all go? Be well, stay safe. It goes without saying, wash your hands, and then use moisturizer, because mine are definitely starting to feel it. We'll be back in touch with you. I'm hoping everybody's going to be doing well, and your families and all of that will be doing well. Just know that we're thinking of you, and we've all got each other's backs. And again, kind of closing in the place where I opened, really inspired and grateful. Just so extraordinary to see how much folks have over the last couple of weeks listened, learned, assessed, and taken action. Just incredible. So thank you much. You have a part to play. We'll see you back pretty soon, maybe tomorrow. All right. Be well. Bye again.
All right, see ya.